live here.
We live here.
We live here.
We live here.
A project exploring
race,
Class,
power,
poverty,
systems and the people they touch.
I'm Emmanuel Berry.
And I'm Tim Lloyd.
And from St. Louis Public Radio.
This is We Live Here.
On today's show, what are you, being multiracial in St. Louis? As you know, our show is about systems and how they impact people. But today we are going to take a look at the abstract system of race and how it relates to multiracial people. So, over the past year, I've spent a lot of time covering Ferguson, but here's one interview that I did in Ferguson that stands out to me above the rest. I'm standing on this apartment porch and I'm talking to several people, asking what's going on in their community, their thoughts on what's happening in Ferguson. And this one gentleman who's going off kind of on this rant, mid-tirade, stops and says to me, "You're a mulatto, aren't you?" It felt kind of like being slapped. First, and mainly because of the word choice, because I would prefer not to be called a mulatto. And second, because why did it matter in that moment? Why was my background in that moment a point of discussion? I didn't ask him then. It just didn't seem appropriate. But I've carried that incident with me all year, and it's raised a lot of questions. New ones, like what's it like to be multiracial here in St. Louis, a city so heavily divided? And old questions about identity, about what it means to be multiracial in general. Today, I'm flying solo in the host seat. Don't worry, Tim's not going anywhere. But unfortunately, I am. This is my last We Live Here podcast, and as such, I've decided to take some time to explore these lingering questions. So please indulge me, and let's go on a little multicultural exploration. I figured the best place to start is where most multiracial, biracial kids come from, which would be parents. And actually, I decided to start with mine, Bobby and Eileen.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hey, Dad. You and Mom are both there?
Yeah, we're right here.
Okay. Can you both hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Can you hear us?
So I called my parents with a simple question. How did you meet?
Yeah, I want to hear her version.
Well, memories are kind of funny. They change over the years a little bit, and everybody has a different memory of an event. But I first saw your dad the summer before our senior year of high school. He had just moved up to the Lansing area, and he was playing basketball. I was a big basketball fan. I met him during the school year, probably about halfway through, pretty much during the basketball season. So my friends and I just kind of casually maybe said hi, or it just kind of progressed from hello or hi to talking to each other.
My mom's story is very innocent, and my dad's version falls along the same lines until you get to here.
She probably wouldn't want me to say this, so I won't say it, but...
Oh, no, you have to be honest.
I thought she was a wonderful-looking young lady, and I always caught her from behind. I don't know why, when she was walking down the hallway. She always wore this special outfit that seemed to catch my eye, so...
Mom, do you know what he's talking about?
Oh, kind of.
She doesn't want to say it either.
Okay, I'll say it. My mother had a pair of pants my father admired. They go on for a bit about what they liked about each other, but here's the thing about my parents' story. The one thing they don't mention, the thing that most people notice when they started dating, is the fact that my father is black and my mother is white.
Back then it was kind of more of a big deal, and race was a consideration, but I never felt like, I never had the philosophy that if I cared about somebody or wanted to be with them, that their particular color or race was going to get in the way. If I just felt comfortable with somebody, that was enough. But I had to keep our relationship away from my family. and that wasn't a great situation. And it's that part of us meeting and getting to know each other isn't really. I don't know. I can't say not my proudest moment, but it's still, not. It wasn't an easy situation.
I mean, what were you were afraid of what your parents would think, or you just didn't know what they'd think, or you knew that they might not?
My dad was racist, and he had to come a long way in our relationship. And even strangely enough, after having open heart surgery twice and losing some of his memory, it seemed to have softened him somewhat. But at the time, I would have been forbidden, and I would have been kicked out of the house. So I was deceitful in having this relationship.
I know my family spoke of, her family is not going to like you, that kind of thing. They're not going to accept you. But my family was not. It was a lot more open to Eileen as far as that is concerned. But they had their concerns in regards to how their family had gone to accept us and about our kids and how they would accept our kids.
But you guys, you got married relatively fast. You dated for 2 or 3 years and then got married. Did things change within that time period at all, or?
And acceptance?
Yeah.
No, my mom and dad did not really. They didn't want us to get married. My dad, I don't think my dad really made any headway right away with that issue, with getting used to that idea.
Give you a little bit of an idea, something that I know that bothered me a little bit. It doesn't now, but it did at the time. Your uncles and their wives, they would come over and they would be able to call their in-laws mom and dad, but I did not ever feel comfortable, ever feel like I could call them mom and dad. And Christmas and holidays was a lot different. I didn't start going over for Christmas with you guys and being involved for a few years until I think when you was born, when Danielle was born, our oldest daughter, and then we gradually start coming over for holidays, and then things start to loosen up a little bit as they got to know me better, I guess. I think maybe they thought the relationship was not going to last very long, or maybe they was hoping over a period of time and loosen up to where we started going up to the cottage, and I started going up to the cottage. So as far as those things, as the family, some things did start to get loosened up. My mother-in-law, we went out to dinner a few times, celebrated birthdays and stuff together. So things started to loosen up as far as doing things together as a family as time progressed. So from that perspective, some of the things did get better, but it never got to a point where I ever felt that I can feel like that was mom and dad.
It's kind of weird because, I don't think I've ever talked to you guys about this, or you guys just never talked about it being that difficult. And it's I always personally assumed, that there were difficulties, but I never actually knew exactly what those difficulties were for you.
Well, we didn't talk about it because we wanted I felt that we wanted you not to feel that there was a big problem or there was a lot of issues, that you should be able to, no matter who you are, live your life and enjoy life and enjoy each other, whether you're black, white, or indifferent. And I think that's one of the things that I try to make sure instill, that you guys would not feel like you're any different from anybody else just because you're biracial.
But we also, I think,
But I wasn't naive to the point that she was biracial.
And we tried to let you determine what your identity was going to be. We knew you were on the fence. And as much as people say, oh, great, you got your foot, you can go either way, or you can put your foot on either side. But the fence is lonely. And it's not easy. And I feel like maybe I didn't always express to you that we knew that it was difficult at times.
Well, the fence is getting a lot less lonely. In a recent study, the Pew Research Center estimates that just under 7% of the U.S. population is multiracial. The center also found that the number of people identifying as multiracial has increased. The report also notes that having a multiracial identity is complicated and not a uniform experience. About 60% of adults who have a mixed-race background do not identify as multiracial, and yet about the same percentage say that they are proud of their background. So, as you can see, the Pew report is full of findings which reflect the complicated nature of being multiracial. But I wanted to conduct my own survey of sorts. Way less scientific, but still valuable. I spoke with 3 different people about their experience of being multiracial. All of them currently live in St. Louis, and they each have varied experiences.
I'm Felia Davenport. I'm an associate professor of theater, focus, and costume design at the University of Missouri St. Louis, and I'm also the chair of the theater program.
So tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
I grew up in Northern Virginia, so it's different. Everyone, when you're from Virginia, they'll ask you if you're from Northern Virginia. So I grew up originally on Quantico, the Marine base. My mom worked for the Marines. My family is lineage of military. And lived there, and then eventually moved more down to like the Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania area in Virginia.
Tell me about your parents.
My mom raised my sister and I. Her name's Candace, and she was a single working mom, barely made $30,000 a year, supporting 2 girls. So I learned most of my ideals or morals and ethics and whatnot from my mom and her family. And then my father, who is half African-American and half Native American, he lived in Maryland, and he was with us till about, I guess, when I was 2, and then he had left. And so I don't really remember him much as a child, but I know he was around when I was older because he would go and take us to amusement parks. But my mom pretty much is the one who raised us.
How did your mom talk to you about race?
It was interesting because I don't remember knowing that I was different from my mother until I was told by my stepmother when I was 7. I think she primarily did that out of maliciousness more so than anything else. She didn't care for my mom, and she didn't really like us. And so I think it was a way to, I think by telling my sister and I this, it was a way to break us or disconnect us some way from our mother, which it really didn't. I couldn't understand why it was a big deal as a kid. I didn't get it, didn't really care. My mom always, when we lived with her, she made sure every neighborhood we lived in was multicultural. She didn't want us to be where we felt like outcasts or we stood out. She wanted it to be where we felt inclusive. So I never understood that mentality. And because of that, surprisingly enough, I got into books a whole lot and started reading. And then I was trying to figure out, why do people hate? And so then I became obsessed really with like hate groups and started researching all of them and trying to understand where they were rooted from. Why do they have this mentality? Why am I disliked because I happen to be brown? I never understood it. And so I was like, well, I got to figure out why and try to find a way to understand it.
And do you think you found a way to understand it? Or
I think
what kind of sense have you made of it?
The sense I made is that it's choices and it's environment. You know, as a kid, it's like that running joke of Dave Chappelle's, where he was a black man who was blind and part of the KKK. You know, we are blind to, and to me that's just rooted more than just the comedic value of it. I think it's also that we are blind to what's outside of ourselves. We are raised in a certain environment and taught certain rules or ways or morals and ethics, and unless you make that choice to leave that environment and to broaden yourself, you're not going to know what's out there.
I think understanding of your identity as a multiracial person, I think it changes for some people throughout time. I mean, have you had an evolution of sorts in your understanding of your identity?
I think my convictions have become stronger primarily. I never ever identified as anything growing up, really. It was just like, it's Falia. My running joke was I was obsessed with the Highlander TV series and films, and so I used to tell everyone, I'm like Highlander, there can only be one. And so that was my tagline. I'm dorky like that, but I just always kind of did my own thing. I never really cared if I was liked or disliked, I really didn't. My mom loved that, though. She thought it was the coolest thing ever that, I was into vintage clothing, but I would pair it with modern stuff, and I would do whatever I wanted. And she loved it because I would walk around in plaid bell-bottoms and orange metallic platform tennis shoes and not care. I just did it.
What's it like being multiracial in St. Louis?
Interesting. It's so interesting. When I first moved here, people would sit here and identify me as sister. So moving to St. Louis was different because I wasn't known as Falia. I was known as that sister I was telling you about. And I'm just like, by you just calling me that sister, I know what that identifies me as, and that just says that's black woman. And now you really are just throwing me to a color. And that I don't approve of. And two, you will call me by my God-given name. And then it was also so much black-white. It was like white people this or black people this. And I felt torn because I'm yelling at people at one point who are saying white people this, and then I'm turning around yelling at people who are saying black people this. And I'm just like, defending every single side. I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand the line divide here. I didn't grow up like that. And so I would call my mom every day, and I was like, I don't get these people. What's up with the Midwest? I said, what's going on in the Midwest? I was like, it feels so separated.
Falia moved to the Midwest, to St. Louis. But the next person I spoke with was born and raised here, and growing up in the city greatly shaped him as a person.
My name is Robert Williams. I'm 30 years old. I currently live in Florissant. I am a husband and father of one. I grew up primarily in North St. Louis, right around Page and Goodfellow. My mother's Caucasian, my father's black. My mother's family is still in the area, and I remember driving all the way out of Peoria, somewhere into a small town. It was kind of like in backwoods, and she gets us all out the car. It's really cold. I remember being really cold, and she takes us to the doorstep, and she knocks on the door, and she announces that it's her and my grandfather. I've seen him only one time in my life. My grandfather opens the door, looks at the four of us. My mom says, "Hi, Dad." And he says, "Get these niggers away from my porch." He closes the door. That was my first experience as racism, but I really didn't take it in until a couple years ago. But to watch my mother go back to the car with the look of shame and disappointment really gave me this sense of the world that I haven't really seen yet, is that you won't always be accepted no matter what you do. That was my grandfather. I haven't seen him even to the last days of his life. I didn't get a chance to see him again. But when I did, my mother said, "Don't worry about it because it wouldn't change anything." I usually get what you mix with. And, being in a black community, that's the first thing that you get asked. What do you mix with? When I was younger, the only thing I can think of is to relate it to food. If you ever go to a buffet, there's vanilla and there's chocolate, and then there's the swirl. There's the mix between the chocolate and the vanilla. And I just think of the swirl, and I just say, I'm black and white, but if I said, if you had an ice cream, I'll be swirl. And they laugh at it. It's kind of like an opening thing. I've always looked at this situation as trying to make a light out of the darkness and try to make things that people were scared of feel more light about it. It's a whole thing of, if you don't know what it is, then you're going to not like it, or you'll hate it, or you'll dislike it. I come from a black community. It's primary black, and there might be little specks of Asians or Hispanic or white, but it's primarily black, and that's what I grew up with. Basically, I'm a super code switcher in St. Louis. Now, when I grew up, this is not how I talked. I had to learn this. I had to learn a language, and sometimes my North St. Louis drawl will come through. Like if I'm talking, let's say for example, I'm in the area and someone asks, hey man, you got a cigarette? And I go, nah man, I ain't got a cigarette. I ain't got a lighter. Nah dog, I ain't got it. And you would just adapt to it. And if you're down the street or if you're in, let's say the Hill, and someone asks you for a cigarette, hey, do you have a cigarette? Oh, sorry, man, I don't even have a lighter. I learned code switching when I used to watch cartoons. I seen how Batman used to change his voice, and I said, I can do that. I can do it very well. I can work on this. And by the time I got to use it, it was like a power. And I said, oh man, I can do something with this. I don't have to be two people, but I can communicate in two different platforms. It was more like the Mario Lopez thing. When they would say, you look like Mario Lopez, it was supposed to be a diss. And I'll say, oh, watch it, Preppy. And they would just, they'll laugh about it. They'll get a really good kick out of it because you tried to knock me down, but I found a way to hold on so that you wouldn't. I'm not going to fall into a hole that you want me to fall into. And being biracial sometimes in St. Louis, it's good not to be put in a box because I get to have that ability. I get to blend in. I get to be the chameleon of the city.
The last person I spoke with I found online. Earlier this year, 15-year-old Alexa Brunsma published an editorial in the Grand Center Arts Academy newspaper. That's the high school she went to. The essay was about being biracial. She was kind enough to read it for us and let us condense her essay for radio. It's titled Blackish. Not black, not white, but somewhere in between. Here's Alexa.
I am a biracial girl. My mom is black and my dad is white. I grew up in a diverse suburban area in California, and my character, my talents, and my attitude is what defines me. At least that's what used to define me. It seems like now my race, my skin color, my hair, my look is what defines me. I've never experienced the colorism and segregation that I've experienced here in St. Louis, Missouri, here at my school, or from my friends. I don't have a good sense of who I really am anymore. All my life I've had one of the most outgoing and determined personalities. I rarely let anyone tell me what to do or what to be, and if they tried, they would know not to do it again. I moved to St. Louis when I was 12 and very quickly learned that people are separated by what they look like and are treated in certain ways because of it. Call me naive, but I didn't know that existed to the extent in which it did until I saw it here. I always got comments and questions on my race and family makeup, and after the constant badgering, I never forgot I was a biracial person again. Now I'm 15 and going to a school in the city which is predominantly black. I'm always reminded that I'm not really black or that I look like a little Cuban girl. It sounds pretty innocent, and to be honest it is, until it becomes the only thing people see and the only thing people talk about. After about 2 years of brainwashing, I simply wasn't the person I had known myself to be. I'd let the ignorance of what other people said become my truth and taint my vision of myself. I identify as a biracial person, and there's nothing more to it. It seems as though the Southern thinking ways of St. Louis have caused me to have an identity crisis, one that I currently still struggle with. My wish for others is that they become educated on race and culture so that as people, we aren't defined or fixated on that. My wish for myself is simply that I gain the love I once had for myself again. I never want to allow somebody else's uneducated opinions and way of thinking to become my thoughts. Though I wish people judge me based off me as a person, I've unfortunately accepted that that's not the mindset or space that everyone is in. Until then, I somehow have to figure out how to teach myself to love me again based off my character and not anything else. It's difficult because I'm still trying to figure out who I am, but I guess this is just another part of my journey.
So you open your essay talking about what defines you as a person, and how, that's changed and how you're struggling with that. So I'm going to ask you now, what defines you as a person?
Well, I think after writing this essay, it was kind of not only an eye-opener, I think, for a lot of other people, but for me too. And I think that slowly but surely my talents, my attitude, and my character is what defines me. And I think it was just a moment in time where this was, because it was thrown in my face so heavily.
Yeah, I mean, you talk also about that transition of moving to St. Louis and what it's like to be someone who's biracial in St. Louis, in a town that we know is very racially segregated, in a town that has all of these divides. Talk about that move and what it was like for you.
That move was stressful and it was different, like all my fundamental growing years were in California. That truly is my home, always will be. And to come here, it was black and white. It was so different. And I didn't really realize that was an issue for people, or that it was just something that they were interested in, because for me as a young person, I definitely were used to seeing people of color, and they weren't always black.
Do you feel like people often try and define you and put you in a box?
In a way, because also in a way I felt like I've always been out of place. So, I mean, in some instances, yes, and in some, no, because people make you kind of question what you look like and who you are, and does it match up or not. But yes, because people would always say, well, that little mixed girl, it was never my name. It was that mixed girl, or, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, and how does that feel when people try and tell you who you are, essentially?
Horrible. But like I said, I mean, I usually put a stop to it, and a lot of people have hated me because of it, but that's perfectly fine with me, because, I mean, any chance I get to experience or to talk to somebody else about my own life experience, it makes me really happy, because I feel like I've had a pretty blessed one, honestly.
So what do I know? What can I take away after my survey? Well, for one, everyone's experience is different and nuanced. Falia never questioned her identity. Lexi used her essay to reaffirm who she is after struggling with that question in the face of a new environment. And Robert likes moving between spaces. I guess I can also say that nobody likes to be told what they are, or to be asked to place themselves in a category for someone else's benefit. The question I've been holding on to, what does it mean to be multiracial, is probably one I'll never stop asking. And that's okay, because I don't think it's a question that has a finite answer. Hi, it's me, Emmanuel again, and the reason I sound different right now is that I'm recording from a distant land. I recorded this podcast a few weeks ago before I left, and because there was so much to do and so many things to complete and so many people to say goodbye to, I didn't quite get around to saying goodbye to We Live Here. So I'm doing it now. As I mentioned at the top, this was my last show. I have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to live and work abroad, so I have left St. Louis. I've had the opportunity to tell some amazing stories and discover some eye-opening things while working on this project, and for that, I am truly grateful. I want to thank you all for listening, and I hope you continue to do so as the We Live Here project continues on. We Live Here is produced by me, Emmanuel Berry. The show is also produced by Tim Lloyd. Shula Newman is our editor, and Marky Freivogel is the editor of St. Louis Radio. Our theme song was composed by Cassie Morgan. From St. Louis Public Radio, this is We Live Here.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
From PRX.